So I have spent about 3 years and a lot of money in therapy, coming to terms with and deconstructing the fact that I was involved in a cult for about 5 years. So, and I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean it very literally. And the more that I learn about it, the more I go, oh yeah, I was in a cult, which is still very new for me to say. But you don't jump into a cult. It's a very slow burn. It's a very slow process to the point where you obviously have no idea that it's happening while it's happening to you. And then even as people are trying to hit you over the head to tell you that what you're involved in is problematic, you just, the group, the cult nature makes you believe that of course those folks are wrong and they just don't understand you. And that's how they create isolation. Which keeps you within the cult context and scared of sharing kind of what's going on with the rest of your support system. So for me, this came by way of yoga. The yoga that I participated in was not a cult. The cult was called Landmark, and you can look it up. Number one thing is Landmark a cult? Like if you Google Landmark, that's what comes up immediately. And funny enough, that was not when I found out that I was in a cult. That happened over a much longer process. But this organization that I worked with and my personal mentor, who was in Lancaster, slowly pulled us in. You know, you kind of get into these things because someone that you really know well and trust kind of brings you very slowly along. And then she had modeled our yoga organization after Landmark because that was what she knew and it worked really well for her. And so kind of the thing about the cult that sucks you in is that you're constantly pushed to kind of have like enlightenment moments. That's kind of what got me pretty hooked into it, and that aligns really well with yoga. And what happens is, especially, there's multiple ways to get to that state. So in yoga, when you're practicing and you're moving your body, endorphins are released within your body, and you actually become very susceptible to things and what is being told to you because you're in a feel-good state, and that's a physiological response. And in Landmark, they didn't do it through yoga. It was not a physical practice, but it was this act of clearing. And so anytime that you would come up against some kind of interaction that was negative, or you had a disagreement with someone, you would clear it, right? And the main reason I'm here today, literally, is because I started watching the Scientology documentary on Netflix, and the title of it is literally Getting Clear. And I never knew that my language of getting clear was a direct Scientology pull, which was then used in the Landmark, which is what I did. So I started going to forums. Other people paid for them for me at first, because that's the other thing with cults, is they continually plug you for money eventually. You go to the first one for free and you bring your friends, and then they tell you how great it is, and then you just stay. And I went to 4 different entire weekend-long trainings over the course of about 4 years. And in each of those, a lot of my friends who I was with kept dropping away. And they kept going, this is not for me, and then they would leave. But of course, Landmark taught me that that's because they can't handle what's happening. That's actually their problem. They have a problem. They're not willing to confront what's going on with them or do the work, and that's why they've left. Never is it that there's any problem with the work that we're doing. And so I was participating in these. I was burning relationships with a lot of people around me because we were constantly encouraged to call people that you had some kind of stickiness or trouble with in the past and tell them that you had this trouble with them in the past. So my friends and family started getting phone calls from me where I would dump massive amounts of trauma on them and then hang up, because I was in a different state. It's really interesting to talk about now. So this went on for about 4 or 5 years. And my yoga organization that I ended up becoming the president of the board for, because it was a nonprofit, was completely modeled after Landmark. Lots of hierarchy, lots of confusing kind of structures, lots of mentorship relationships where I was told it was okay for me to like indulge in other people's trauma as if I was a therapist. I am not a therapist. And then one day, my mentor had a massive psychotic break. And it was the single most terrifying moment of my life when I found this out. I was actually on a motorcycle trip, then had to ride my motorcycle home, talk about having lots of time to think about things. And I became the executive director of this organization because she was not mentally fit to do it. And so I had to take over. And this became the massive undoing of my entire journey in the yoga and wellness world as well as in Landmark. And I had to confront all of the things that I had been working through in relationships with people and confront all of the relationships I had completely damaged. The turning point for me was reading the book Cultish, which is a really excellent book. And it talks about language, and it talks about how cults, MLMs, multi-level marketing structures, like, you're selling whatever, 31 or whatever, as well as a lot of wellness places. CrossFit is an example, and a lot of yoga, places are examples of that as well, but they use very specific types of language to isolate you and to kind of keep you embedded in it. And this began a great uncrumbling of me. So fast forward to this past Monday, here goes what happens with my therapist every so often as I'm talking to him. His name is Mo, and Mo will say to me, Rita, I noticed that you've been justifying people, or you've been doing X. Over the last couple weeks, you keep doing X. And I go, okay, let me think about that. Let me think about why I'm doing that, because you pointed it out. And then I go, oh, that's a Landmark thing. And he goes, all right, let her rip. And then I explain the ideology behind whatever the thing is that has been drilled in me to such an extent that I never realized that it was from Landmark, right? I just thought that it was reality. And he, who is great at keeping a poker face, I mean, this man is like flat, just loses his mind when I will explain these things to him, and his reaction is huge and oddly satisfying. And then he goes, okay, Rita, let me explain to you where that is based in psychology and then where it is absolutely fucked up. And together we walk through these experiences under a new lens where I'm able to separate why I was taught that, but then why it's extremely damaging. And I still feel like I'm honestly at the beginning of this journey, and it's been almost 3 years. But every time I'm gaining better relationships with my friends, I'm gaining better relationships with my family, and the level of my mental health has only improved as I've worked on overcoming this.